Welcome to Epilogue, where I tell you folktales and legends, then fabricate my own counterpart from those root yarns. I am that shadow cast by the light at the end of your street, a shape not of this world and moving closer with each blink, but you can call me Izzie Cava. A cryptid is an animal whose existence is disputed or unsubstantiated, like Bigfoot or the Jersey Devil. These are creatures who have a mythology of their own and a handful of feverish believers. There are some whose notoriety is known the world over, and others whose renown is confined to the neighborhoods they have roamed through. The Dover Demon is one such beast, who supposedly went on something of a spree on a 2-mile stretch of road in Dover, Massachusetts. Dover is about 25 miles south of Boston, and the town where 17-year-old Bill Bartlett first saw the beast on Farm Street, perched on a broken stone wall on the night of April 21st, 1977. He was driving with his friends when he caught sight of a creature that he described as being about 4 feet tall, with a watermelon-shaped head, glowing orange eyes, no nose or mouth on its face, disproportionately spindly limbs, and tendril-like fingers. Bill drew a sketch of the creature when he got home, a sketch that would later be compared to John Baxter's own image of the same cryptid. 15-year-old John Baxter was walking home from his girlfriend's house at around midnight of the same day when he claimed to have seen the creature on Miller Hill Road. His sketch and description were identical to Bartlett's, adding that it had, quote, a figure-8-shaped head and moved with an eerie, almost mechanical gait. The following evening, April 22nd, 1977, 15-year-old Abby Brabham saw the Dover Demon on Springdale Avenue when she was being driven home by her boyfriend. Like the others, she described a small, humanoid creature, adding that it was hairless, nearly featureless, and had sandpaper-like skin. All of them said that as soon as it was seen, it scurried into the woods and was lost to the night. Renowned cryptozoologist Loren Coleman dubbed the creature the Dover Demon, and it has made its way into the local folklore for the residents of Dover. Some have pointed out the similarities between this oddity and the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter. On August 21st, 1955, 11 people arrived at the Hopkinsville police station in Kentucky, claiming to be under attack from extraterrestrials. Lucky Sutton and his wife Vera had brought their friends Billy Ray and June Taylor to visit Lucky's mother, Glennie Langford. Lucky's brother, his wife, a family friend, and Lucky's 3 younger half-siblings were also present that evening. The story goes that they were playing a game of cards when Billy Ray saw a round, metallic object trailed by rainbow streaks flying above the farm. When he and Lucky went to investigate, they claimed to have seen a short, gray, glowing, human-like creature with large eyes and a strange, floating gait, arms raised as if in surrender. They went back to their farmhouse and armed themselves. They claimed to have seen the figures appear out of the darkness of night, standing in doorways and peeking in windows. They fired their weapons at the interplanetary trespassers. Then after 4 hours of patrolling the property with their guns, they accepted that they had scared off the aliens. Nothing was found to substantiate their claims, but when the encounter was printed in the papers, the gray skin was changed to green, and the cultural phenomenon of little green aliens made its way into the annals of pop culture. Some blame pop culture for inspiring people to conjure such tales as the Dover Demon or little gray space invaders in Kentucky. One of the earliest tales of extraterrestrial threat comes from famed English author H.G. Wells, whose War of the Worlds novel is one of the many examples of invasion literature that became popular in fiction. Between 1871 and the First World War, anxieties about being invaded from neighboring countries or being subjected to the very colonization that was being enacted abroad gave rise to stories about powers from beyond the stars making Earth their colony. A similar fear is attributed to the spike in UFO sightings in America during the 1940s and 50s. With the threat of the Cold War and the hysteria surrounding McCarthyism, invasion literature took on a more sinister face. Ours. Aliens continued to permeate pop culture, with both Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind premiering in 1977, the same year sightings of the Dover Demon were first reported. Whether or not this beast is a cryptid, a tourist from the stars, or simply an animal misidentified in the dark, it cannot be denied that Bill Bartlett, John Baxter, and Abby Brobham saw something in that dark, something that we do not yet have the capacity to explain. And now for our epilogue. Vincent March was the most logical man anyone had ever met. His co-workers used to joke that he was like a robot in his mannerisms. They said that it seemed like for him, thinking was really a matter of computing, of taking in information and redistributing it over the most utilitarian logic. There was something in Vincent that always balked at the joke. He'd been part of an AI startup that went from being Cheeto-dusted code smashed into someone's mom's desktop computer to one of the most profitable stocks on Wall Street. That's when the joke began to eat at him, because he knew better than most how AI thought, and it was not beginning to think more like him. He was beginning to think more like it. That thought began to weigh on him, and when it was too much for him to bear, he packed up his office in Silicon Valley and bought himself a little house in Saltville, Virginia. He had more money than he could ever need, but still took an IT job at a car manufacturing company that employed most of the town, Asterius Automotive. It got him out of the house and talking to real people, which was a nice change of pace from the tech world. Besides, the company was well respected in that town. His neighbor, an older gentleman named John Fowley, took a great amount of pride in telling Vincent that his father had worked for Asterius, and his father before him, and so on. John and Tessa Fowley had lived in the house next to Vincent's practically all their lives. They were the picture of Southern hospitality. An hour or two after the moving truck pulled up to Vincent's house, Tessa was on his porch with a fresh-baked blueberry pie in hand. She peppered him with small talk at 1,000 miles an hour, only ending when Vincent apologized for not yet having unpacked enough to invite her in. She would only accept his apology if he came over to their house for dinner the following evening. She thought he was too skinny and needed a good home cooking to stick to his ribs. Vincent met John Fowley the next day, and found him to be over the top with his red-blooded American persona. But throughout the meal, Vincent watched that character slip into a good-natured old man with a heart of gold and endless love for his wife. This is when John told Vincent all about working for Asterius, and was beside himself with joy at Vincent's coming to join them. As he was leaving, Vincent asked Mr. Fowley how his father was enjoying his retirement after all those years at the company. Mr. Fowley got a sort of faraway look in his eye, and then told Vincent he didn't know. He hadn't heard from his father in a very long time. That night Vincent went home, happier than he had been in years, warmed by his neighbor's hospitality and the comfort of the meal he had just eaten. Vincent was never the type to go to sleep after eating, so he took his book to the back porch and read under the porch light for a little while, glancing through the screen every so often at the woods behind his house. That was the first time he saw it. 2 glowing orange eyes staring back at him. Vincent blinked, and they were gone. It was late, so Vincent decided he was imagining things, and went to bed. The next day was his first at Asterius Automotive, and he was pleased that it was exactly the kind of job he was looking for. Rebooting accounting software, fighting with ancient printers, reorganizing digital files. Nothing too intelligent. Whenever he passed John, which was infrequent but unavoidable, John would give him the biggest smile and a friendly wave. Vincent's Sunday dinners with the Fowleys became a weekly occurrence, and he looked forward to telling them about his life and hearing the memories they built in that house. Then Mrs. Fowley would send him home with an ungodly amount of baked goods, which she'd replenish for him throughout the week. Every night he would enjoy one of those treats with a cup of tea, then read in his bedroom until he was tired. His bedroom window faced the woods, and his focus would occasionally drift to the window, thinking of those orange eyes he'd surely imagined. That is, until he saw them again. They were looking right up at him, and the porch light from the Fowleys' house revealed the glowing orange eyes to be set in a large, football-shaped head, disproportionate to the thin body propping it up. It peeked out from behind the tree, its spindly fingers wrapping around the trunk. It was unmistakably looking through his window, very poorly trying to conceal itself from his line of sight. Vincent closed the book and went to the window, but the eyes vanished the moment Vincent shifted. He reopened the book and pretended to read the page, always looking at the window out of his periphery. The eyes returned, and when Vincent remained motionless, the creature moved a little further away from its hideout. Straining to look without moving his head, Vincent began to see that its flesh was a grayish-green color, and its face bore no other features save the unblinking orange eyes. Vincent was so focused on observing this creature, he did not notice that it was joined by another. He did not notice until he turned his head just enough and saw the other spy peering through his window. He reached for the flashlight he kept by his bed, and as quickly as he could, he turned on the beam and shined it through the window. He just barely caught the grayish bodies as they retreated into the woods. That's when he noticed they didn't move in the way an animal might. They seemed to have to turn their whole bodies if they were going to change direction. It was almost like they had less joints than they should. Even so, they moved quickly once they were disturbed. That was the first of many nights Vincent would spend with the Watchers. He became more and more obsessed with the little creatures, and it seemed they shared their fascination with him. He would see one or two of them every couple of days, then every day, then twice a day, once when he woke, and once when he was drifting off to sleep. In the early days, Vincent kept what he had seen a secret, not because he doubted the existence of something strange in the woods, but because he could not logically categorize these beasts and their desires into any reasonable explanation, so he did not share what he had seen. He theorized that perhaps whoever had lived in this house before him had developed some sort of relationship with these things, and they were confused at having been abandoned by their friend. The thought filled him with a kind of grief, so he left an open tin of tuna out for them. He wasn't sure how else to engage with them, but that was his best guess as to why the little creatures paid him visits. When he finally broached the conversation, it was at Sunday dinner with the Fowleys. He asked them if they'd seen anything peculiar in the woods behind their houses. When they asked him what he meant, he did not elaborate beyond there being some sort of East Coast animal in his backyard at night, something he had never seen before. Mrs. Fowley assured him it was a coyote. They'd been giving her cats trouble for years. She left the room to fetch Vincent a book about local wildlife, when Mr. Fowley leaned over and whispered that he'd seen them too, the orange eyes in the wilderness. John didn't know what they were either, but when he cleaned out his father's house, he'd found a drawing of something he wanted Vincent to see. John had kept the drawing hidden from Tessa, not wanting to worry her. Vincent offered condolences on his father's passing, but Mr. Fowley didn't want them. He just got that faraway look in his eyes again, and told Vincent that his father hadn't died. He just wasn't home anymore. Mrs. Fowley returned before Vincent could ask any more questions, and while she fussed with all the bird-watching and plant-identifying books, Vincent saw Mr. Fowley put a finger to his lips. They spoke no more of it that evening. The next day, there was a piece of paper that had been torn from a yellow legal pad, folded neatly on Vincent's desk at the office. There was a note on the side facing him that read, "Show no one. Tell no one. Do not speak to it. Do not speak to Tessa. John." Vincent opened the paper and found a rough sketch of exactly the type of beast he had been seeing. Oblong head, no features save round eyes, and a thin body with spindly fingers. The lines were straight and precise, not bending where the creature's knees or elbows should have been. Vincent stowed the note away in his breast pocket, and the moment he returned home he studied it further. That was the first night he took up a vigil on his back porch, keeping the light off to see if they'd come any closer. He saw them, piercing the darkness with their eyes to look at him. In the light of the moon and the distant glow of the Fowleys' porch light, Vincent confirmed that the drawing was entirely accurate to the little homunculi in the woods. He wasn't sure what this meant or who he could tell, but he decided to keep up his watch until he knew what to say. Night after night, he would sit on his dark porch and watch them, watching him. It occurred to him that they never crossed the property line, always remaining in the woods. He tried once to approach them, but the moment he opened his back door, all of the eyes vanished. Vincent's days became consumed with thoughts of what they could be. It was driving him mad, but that's what he was afraid of, so he kept his musings private. Whenever he tried to speak to John about them, John would shush him, or quickly change the subject to something mundane. That was when Vincent started to notice how tired John seemed. He wasn't as animated at their Sunday dinners, and even his ornery American persona lost its bluster. He could see Tessa trying to rouse John with conversations about their daughters, the company, TV programs, anything. John would go through the motions of engaging with her, then would fall into a silence, sitting almost perfectly still, with that faraway look in his eye. After their final Sunday dinner, Vincent went home and sat on his back porch. He could see the creatures, and they could see him, and for the first time, Vincent looked to his right. John Fowleys sat beneath his own porch light, rifle in hand. John's tired eyes were fixed on the woods, as Vincent's had been for weeks. The creatures did not step into the pool of light cast by that one valiant porch light, but they were in John's yard. Vincent kept his vigil, this time in the direction of the Fowleys' house. But the hearty meal was warm in his stomach, and he'd treated himself to a few glasses of Tessa's wine, so he drifted into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, birdsong woke him. Vincent was still on his porch. He looked out at the woods and found that for the first time in a long time, he was unobserved. That was the last time Vincent saw John Fowley. He wasn't at work that day or the next. Vincent returned the wildlife books to Mrs. Fowley and asked if her husband was all right. She got her own faraway look and said he'd taken a trip, probably to visit their daughters. Vincent's further inquiries were silenced by the kitchen timer going off, alerting Tessa that her pumpkin bread was done baking. A few days later, John was officially declared a missing person. Vincent tried to take care of Tessa best he could, cooking what meals he could manage and helping her clean the house. She was grateful for Vincent's help, but she no longer baked, crocheted, or read, all the hobbies Vincent knew she loved well. When the financial stress of the sole breadwinner's disappearance began to weigh on her, Vincent quietly wrote Tessa checks. At first, she refused to cash them, but the weeks dragged into months, and she began to rely on Vincent to support her. Vincent's watch of the little creatures practically tripled after John's disappearance. Ever since he'd seen them in the Fowleys' yard, he had trouble sleeping. He was beginning to grow afraid of them, and his exhaustion fed a paranoia about their intentions. Were they hunters, looking for the opportune moment to strike him down? Were they worker bees, on the orders of a queen to watch him until... What? What would they do to him? His imagination was certainly more active those days, dreaming up the horrors they might enact against him, that they likely enacted against his neighbor. These were the thoughts swirling in his mind on the dark April night when one of them walked into his yard. It did so carefully, measuring each step as if it expected some sort of consequence. Vincent froze, unsure of how to proceed. He had no weapon to subdue it, and even if he did, he was not violent by nature. The only thing he could think of was turning on his porch light. When the light came on, he heard a surprised chittering sound come from the creature. Then it rotated on its heel and hobbled back into the shadows, remaining on his property. Vincent looked over at the Fowleys' house and saw the lights were off and the porch was empty. Emboldened by the oddity of the advance in their months-long stalemate, Vincent bit back his fear and opened the back door. He stood in his yard, looking at the creature. It did not break its glowing gaze. Vincent gingerly approached it, always remaining in the safety of the light. When the light wore thin and his shadow grew longer, Vincent stopped. In response, the thing took a little step forward. Vincent knelt and offered it a hand, as if it might sniff it. The creature lifted a long finger towards him in response, then another. Then all at once it raised its hand and waved. Vincent couldn't help but utter a little laugh as he waved back. Then the porch light from the Fowleys' house snapped on, cutting across Vincent's yard. The homunculus retreated into the tree line with its brethren. All sets of orange eyes, save the one Vincent had watched run away, vanished when Tessa Fowley came onto her back porch and asked Vincent what he was doing. He said he thought he'd seen a coyote, and she urged him to go back inside his house. It wasn't safe to be out with the wild animals. Vincent listened to her, but only insofar as to go inside and stand at his bedroom window. He kept the porch light on all through the night, and that solitary creature waited for him on the edge of that shadow, meeting Vincent's weary gaze with its own inscrutable stare. Vincent almost wasn't sleeping anymore, which affected his work, however rudimentary it was to him. The numbers in the accounting software weren't making sense these days, nor were the materials he peeked at in the inventory. The computers were acting in ways they shouldn't have, such as Vincent stumbling on firewalls that were more advanced than the technology they were programmed into. Vincent's boss knew that he had been close to John, so he encouraged Vincent to take a few days off to get his head in order. Vincent gratefully accepted, then went home and waited for nightfall. He made sure to stock up on light bulbs, should his porch light go out. He also purchased several military-grade flashlights from a local army surplus store, so he would always have a light to protect himself with. As he was arranging his plunder for another night on the watch, there came a knock at his front door. It was Tessa Fowley, a warm batch of snickerdoodle cookies in hand. Her eyes were red from crying. She gave him the cookies and invited him to the memorial she was holding for John on Sunday. Vincent tried to tell her that it usually took years for a person to be considered legally dead, and it had only been a matter of months. She silenced his logic by putting a hand to her heart and telling him she had a feeling John was gone from her, forever. Vincent agreed to attend the memorial without another moment's hesitation. Then she went on her way. Vincent made himself a cup of tea and took the cookies to the porch with him as dusk sank into nightfall. He saw the eyes in the woods, and again the lone creature made its way into his yard. The porch light had been on for hours, and it took its dutiful place on the outside of the glow. It waved at him again. Vincent waved back. Like the night before, Vincent ventured out into his yard, only this time he held his cup of tea in one hand and some cookies in the other. The creature seemed extremely interested in his hands, and Vincent realized it was specifically looking at the cookies. He tossed one about a foot away from the creature. It hobbled to the cookie and pressed it into the side of its head. Vincent still did not see a mouth on the creature, nor did he see any orifice open, but the cookie was gone when the creature raised its hands up towards Vincent. Vincent tossed another cookie at its feet. It ate it in the same manner. Vincent went to his porch and returned with a plate of cookies. He set them down in front of the creature, but they were too far into the light for it to reach them. Against his better judgment, Vincent reached into the shadows and pushed the plate towards the creature. It reached for the plate at the same time, causing Vincent to jump back and put a hand on his pocket, where he had the flashlight waiting. But there was no need for alarm. It simply had its fill of a few more cookies, then much to Vincent's surprise, it pushed the plate back into the light, as if offering some to him. Vincent looked into those unblinking eyes, and for the first time, he did not see this thing as an animal, but rather as some sort of man. They repeated the feeding ritual on Saturday. This exchange had the effect of quieting Vincent's fears, for he no longer thought these were mindless animals on some sort of hunt. He also wondered if they had taken John, or if John had wandered off. It seemed like Alzheimer's ran in his family, so perhaps John followed his father's legacy in more ways than one. These meager comforts were enough to send Vincent to sleep, so he was well rested for the memorial. Vincent saw many of his co-workers there, all of whom had kind words to say about their loyal, hard-working friend and his years of dedicated service to the company. Tessa had printed out little memorial cards with John's picture on one side, and Vincent nervously held it throughout the entire event. When the sun set, he excused himself, but not before Tessa insisted he take a plate or two home with him. He did just that, then rushed home to turn on his porch light. It took longer for his little friend to meet him that night. Vincent waited in his backyard, the plate of confections already on the edge of the light. When it made its way out of the woods, it waved to him again. Vincent waved back, then motioned to the plate on the ground. He did so with the hand that was still holding John's memorial card. The creature was captivated by his hands again, and Vincent tried his best to explain what a memorial card was, because even though he had accepted it was something like human, he could not yet fathom its funerary customs. It waved its other hand, as if in irritation, then continued reaching for the card. Finally, Vincent understood its request and tossed the card into the dark. The creature took the card and held it to his chest, picture side out. Vincent asked if it had been the one to take John. It waved again, more enthusiastically than before. Vincent looked into the printed eyes of the photograph that the creature was coveting. The last time he had seen this greeting was in the office, and it had been accompanied by a huge grin. This thing was seemingly incapable of grinning, but not of communicating its identity to Vincent. Somehow, this creature before him was John Fowley. Vincent tried to ascertain what had happened to him, but John could only chitter and point to the woods. Vincent offered John sticks to draw with or a pen to write with, but John refused these tools. Then all at once, for no reason apparent to Vincent, all the eyes began to move further back into the woods. The creatures were retreating. Only John remained, and he beckoned Vincent to follow him. Vincent asked all the questions he could think of, but there was no change in John's behavior. It did not cease its beckoning until Vincent asked why it had come for him instead of Tessa. Then John chittered in alarm, waving frantically, delivering some sort of desperate warning. Vincent remembered John's words from the image he had given him. "Show no one. Tell no one. Do not speak to it. Do not speak to Tessa." Vincent assured him he would not tell Tessa that he had found her missing husband, but he refused to go into the woods. There were too many unknowns, and though the thought of answers for his questions was tantalizing, the logical part of Vincent's mind was winning. Vincent let John keep the card, then Vincent returned to his house. His sleep was uneasy again. In spite of the relief of knowing John's whereabouts, his imagination flared up again, only this time, the horrors were the woods itself, not the strange creatures within it. That was the last time Vincent waited for the creature in his yard, or even on his porch. He kept the light on, always, but he no longer sought a dialogue with it. That did not stop it from seeking him, and night after night it waited for him in the shadows, beckoning him into the unknown. Vincent received his first write-up at work that week. He'd left too many tickets unanswered, and he lingered at the computers with problems he did solve. He promised he would do better, and while he increased his workload to avoid another backlog, he kept an eye out for more incongruous data. The more he looked for it, the more confusing it was. The only thing that was clear to him was that it had nothing to do with automotive manufacturing. Sometime after that, the Fowley house went on the market. Tessa was going to move in with her daughter and take care of her grandchildren. She was too lonely in that lovely little home without John. Vincent was incredibly saddened by the news. The Fowleys had been his first, and frankly, only friends in Saltville. Tessa made him a recipe book of all her pastries as a gift before she left. Vincent helped her pack, and she gave him some of John's old clothes and her books on local wildlife. She'd become like a mother to him, and it broke his heart to see her go. He had the wherewithal to tell her as much, which is more than he'd ever said to our parents. She promised to write, and tearfully left him with the entreaty to tell John where she was, if he ever came home. When the moving truck drove off and the house stood empty, Vincent looked out his window at the thing that was John in his backyard. It was not beckoning him this evening. It was facing his own yard. In his mind, Vincent wondered if John was crying without the ability to shed tears. Taken by a sentimental impulse the lone monster conjured in him, Vincent opened the recipe book and made Tessa's famous chocolate chip cookies. After a few hours, midnight had come and gone, and Vincent had accomplished a fairly decent approximation of the cookie. He went into the yard, where John was still waiting for him. He set the plate of fresh-baked cookies in front of it. John ate them, all of them, with a zeal he did not know these creatures could exhibit, and John ate them so fast it looked like John was smacking itself upside the head. Vincent laughed. He missed his friend. So this time, when John beckoned him into the woods, Vincent followed. Vincent had switched on one of his flashlights the moment he stepped out of his porch light, and he was careful not to shine it directly at John. As John led him deeper into the woods, Vincent saw just how many of the homunculi had been back behind his house. There was an uncountable number, and as he stumbled past them over dead branches and wet piles of leaves, they did not retreat. One or two of them even waved, and he wondered if he had known them when they looked more like men. They walked long into the night, for what felt like hours. Their pace slowed when they crested a hill a few miles from Vincent's house. At the bottom of it, he recognized the Asterius Automotive Assembly Plant. Being employed primarily in the corporate office, he'd never been to the factory, but he watched now as hundreds of glowing orange eyes streamed out of the surrounding forest and into the dark factory. Vincent was confused, but he'd followed John this far, keeping the light in front of him at all times. Vincent approached the factory. As he got closer to the building, he heard the mechanical sounds of hulking machines at work. He followed John through the doorway, and saw not one light shone on a factory floor that was very much in motion. All the machines were working, and they were tended to by the homunculi that had dogged Vincent for months. In the glow their eyes cast, Vincent saw the assembly lines process metals and shape them into forms that were entirely too small for automobiles. As his eyes strained to follow the progress of the machines being built, he realized they were being shaped into androids. He saw the final pieces snap into place, and the android's eyes lit up orange. It came off of the line and walked directly up to Vincent. Vincent waved at it, for his frame of reference was altered by his time with the homunculi. It raised a hand. Then at lightning speed it grabbed Vincent's wrist in a vice grip. Vincent screamed. It did not let go. It advanced on him, but Vincent managed to match its steps, so it never got any closer. He looked around for the thing that had been John, but they all looked the same to him now, and not one of them was looking at it. Vincent assumed the android was an artificial intelligence of some kind and tried giving it verbal commands, all of which it ignored. Finally, desperate to free himself, Vincent sprained his own wrist to break free of its grasp. Vincent ran towards the door, but in the nearly complete dark, he had trouble finding it. When he did, it was locked. Vincent kept a hand on the wall and felt his way to the other door. It, too, was locked. He was trapped. A faraway window let in a sliver of moonlight, just enough for Vincent to turn and see the very start of the assembly line. He saw one of the homunculi crawl into the machine, and realized that everything this machine did, it did to the beasts, and that these were not androids at all, but rather cyborgs. In a move he thought the cyborgs would be incapable of predicting, Vincent ran towards the machine and wedged himself underneath it. The belt of the assembly line whirred above him, and he heard the slicing and chittering of the next victim of their torturous upgrade. Vincent did his best to calm his breathing and consider his course of action when he realized something beside him was glowing. He turned and found himself face to face with one of the homunculi. It held up something in its spindly fingers, using the light of its eyes to show Vincent the memorial card. It was John. Vincent begged John to save him from this fate. In response, John began chittering, louder, louder, until it was all Vincent could hear. He could see them coming for him, and remembering he still had his flashlight, he clicked it on and shined it directly at John. John didn't move. In fact, in the light, Vincent could see that there were faint lines on John's face, practically imperceptible, making a grin that stretched all the way around John's head. Vincent swept his light around to deter the others, but none of them broke their stride. It was at this precise moment that Vincent understood how intelligent these creatures were, that they had never had an aversion to the light. They'd simply made him believe that they did, to lure him into a false sense of security. The cyborg, its metallic brethren rising up out of the darkness, reached out and took the flashlight, smashing it. Then hands reached out for him, and I don't know what happened next. Maybe Vincent escaped and is leading another life in another place, far away from those machines. Maybe they got him, made him one of their ranks, and sent him out to recruit more friends and neighbors into the cult of the machine. Maybe that's what they want, for all of us to be like them, to usurp mankind and create an empire of steel and stone. Anyway, officer, that's all I know. I haven't spoken to my brother in months, and the last call was so strange. All he told me is that he was finally going to see what the creatures wanted to show him. I just made up the rest. When you find him, please be kind. He has an active imagination, and he's not great about taking his medications. Though between you and me, I've been cleaning out his house for some time now, and I can swear there's something watching me. Something in those woods. Something with orange eyes. That's the end of today's tale. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed telling it. Please remember to like, share, and tell all your friends. Join me next time for more fabricated folktales on Epilogue.